So before I was a minister, as I have told many of you, I taught elementary school, 3rd grade mostly, and I would often talk about my kids. People who didn't know me well would sometimes ask, "How many kids do you have?" And when I answered 32, their eyes would pop until they realized I must be a teacher. And I realized they thought I was a mother. On this day, we set aside to honor our mothers. We usually think first of the women who gave us birth. Yet there are many ways to be a mother. And we are mothered by many throughout our lives. We have many mothers, and it's a good thing we do. Motherhood is an institution loaded with so many expectations and idealizations. We talk of mother love as being unconditional and selfless. And there is something to this. Our mothers gave us life, bore us into this world, and the bond between mother and child is strong. Yet because of that very strength, it is a complicated relationship. Because we are human, it never fully lives up to expectations and the ideals. Today, I hope we can honor our mothers, all of them, reverently, gratefully, and honestly. That which is holy has many names and faces, and so too do the mothers in our lives. For while we have only one biological mother, any real definition of motherhood takes us far beyond the ability to give birth. I know children of lesbian couples who clearly have two very real mothers. And children who have been adopted have two mothers as well. And then I think of all the people, women and men, who have mothered me throughout my life. I think of the children I have mothered as a teacher, as a minister, as an auntie to my niece and nephews, and the children of dear friends. As humans, we have such a capacity to love one another. And the love we feel for our children is perhaps the fiercest and tenderest. We are wired that way. A couple of years ago, a dear friend of mine had identical twin baby girls at age 45, which means I get to be an auntie again. I spent a week with them just a few days after they were born. Unbelievably sweet. Babies smell so wonderful. And their warm bodies, when I held them against my own, with the sense of their utter dependence on me, show me with such clarity that here is something holy and good. Whatever else may happen in their lives, they are born. We are all born worthy, deeply worthy, and inherently good, with the capacity to love and be loved. A huge part of my theology is confirmed simply in holding an infant. Babies trust us to hold them because there's really nothing else they can do. There is an indescribable contentment that can arise when holding an infant, and an indescribable sense of responsibility. We are wired to love our babies. We live now, sort of cosmically, earthwise, we live now in the age of mammals. This is an age that began some 65 million years ago when the time of the dinosaurs was passing. And one of the significant adaptations, evolutionary adaptations of mammals, is the limbic brain, the emotional part of our brain which allows us to love. It is the adaptation that has helped mammals survive and thrive lo these millions of years. Even as humans only arrived relatively recently in this age, we have benefited from the millions of years of development that preceded our arrival. Now, high school biology tends to concentrate on the physical differences between mammals and reptiles, the reptiles from which we evolved. We are warm, not cold-blooded. We have hair, not scales. We give birth to our babies rather than laying eggs. But these physical classifications overlook a major brain difference, according to A General Theory of Love, a book which explores our human capacities to love. And I quote this book, which is just this delightfully slim and poetic volume. I quoted it at some length. As mammals split off from the reptilian line, a fresh neural structure blossomed within their skulls. This brand new brain transformed not just the mechanics of reproduction, but also the orientation toward offspring. Detachment and disinterest mark the parental attitude of the typical reptile, while mammals can enter into subtle and elaborate interactions with their young. Mammals bear their young live, they nurse, defend, and rear them while they are immature. Mammals, in other words, take care of their own. Rearing and caretaking are so familiar to humans that we are apt to take them for granted, but these capacities were once novel. A revolution in social evolution. Mammals form close-knit, mutually nurturant social groups, families, in which members spend time touching and caring for one another. Parents nourish and safeguard their young and each other from the hostile world outside their group. A mammal will risk and sometimes lose its life to protect a child or mate from attack. The limbic brain also permits mammals to sing to their children. Vocal communication between a mammal and offspring is universal. And mammals can play with one another, an activity unique to animals containing limbic hardware. There ends the quote. We tend to like to try to make distinctions between humans and animals, and yet there are fewer differences than some might like to think. Now, mammals also went on to develop another brain system, the neocortex, the thinking brain, and of course this which of course, in addition to the limbic system, complicates things immeasurably. And humans, having the most developed limbic system and neocortex both, also have emotional and relational interactions which are all the more subtle, elaborate, and complicated. Our capacity to love and care for our children, our babies, is what has kept us going as a species. That we can also do terrible things to one another does not detract from the power of this and the truth of it. Nor should knowing that A mother cow can feel such strong love for her calf detract from our capacity as humans to love. I find comfort in knowing that this capacity to love is not limited to humans, that cows can love their babies and my dog can love me. I feel closer to the family created by the interdependent web of all existence, knowing that this capacity to love is shared by many beings. From the beginnings of the world, his arrival and her welcome have been prepared. They have always known each other. If somehow we could hold on to this memory that we have always known each other, perhaps then we would be less likely to do the terrible things of which we are capable. And perhaps this is why we honor and revere mother love, for it calls us all to care for one another. It is also why we need so many mothers in our lives. We are human and complicated and imperfect, and we need one another. For our lives come together and separate, touch each other and move on in ways we can never fully understand or appreciate in the present moment. My childhood friend, or perhaps I should say my childhood nemesis, Kathy Keller, was born on a Mother's Day. It was actually a May 11th Mother's Day, in fact. And she and her mother both loved to tell this story. Kathy, which is not her real name, lived just 2 doors down from me. And between us lived Cheryl, another girl our age who was in the same grade at school. The three of us played together every day after school and all summer long. And we formed a classic childhood triangle. Kathy was an only child, and she was spoiled. Or at least that's how Cheryl and I explained her need to be at the center of everything we did. In our girlish fantasy games, Kathy always got Paul McCartney and Davy Jones. And I know I just dated myself rather seriously. Kathy was strong-willed and manipulative, and she always got her way. It drove Cheryl and me absolutely bonkers, but we never did figure out how to manage and change this dynamic. And this particular triangle provided much of my childhood drama. But Kathy had a great mother. My own mother, for all her gifts to me, was never especially maternal. Kathy's mother was different. Mrs. Keller was fun, full of life and feeling. She listened to us. I don't remember the content of any particular conversation, but I remember laughing a lot and the sense of warmth that pervaded her kitchen. She was kind to me. She recognized a child, not her own, in need of kindness, and she gave it. And she made the best coleslaw on the planet. I don't think I ever really compared her to my own mother. I think I was simply surprised that someone else's mother could be the way Mrs. Keller was. Mrs. Keller died when we were in 6th grade. She was in the hospital for what seemed a very long time, and then she died. I remember someone saying it was something to do with her liver. I was devastated. I remember hearing my mother's end of the conversation when a neighbor called with the news. I was sobbing before she got off the phone. And because of that, because I seemed so upset by it, my parents would not let me attend her funeral, something that I've always regretted. I doubt that my presence would have been much of a comfort to Kathy, but I think it would have made a difference to me. Mrs. Keller was a second mother to me. She had qualities I didn't find in my own mother, and I loved her for it. Now, Kathy and Cheryl and I were already drifting into different crowds when Mrs. Keller died. Kathy went on to be fairly wild through middle school and high school. It wasn't until decades later that I realized that Mrs. Keller was probably an alcoholic and had died of cirrhosis. It explained a lot, both Kathy's spoiled behavior as a child and her wildness as a teen. I can now look back with far greater understanding and compassion for my childhood nemesis. Yet I look back with no less love for Mrs. Keller. She was kind to me, and I will never forget her. So much of our journey in life is about accepting our own flaws and imperfections, and accepting the imperfections of family, friends, and even strangers. Mother's Day can be difficult for many of us. There is much to honor in motherhood, and none of us would be here without our mothers, those who gave us birth, and the other women and, yes, men who have mothered us throughout our lives. We humans literally cannot survive as individuals or as species without mothering. Yet there are so many cultural expectations centered on the ideal of motherhood and a mother's love. None of our mothers always lived up to that ideal, and some fell pretty far short. The expectations of noble and pure love from our mothers can make us feel even more hurt and betrayed when our mothers prove to be less than perfect. Those cultural expectations can also make mothers feel inadequate long before their children get old enough to throw those inadequacies back in their faces. And when a mother's own life makes it all but impossible for her to come even close to the ideal, the pain for her children will never go away. Our relationships with our mothers are complicated, powerful, wonderful, and sometimes awful. I hope today that you will honor all the complications, all of the power, and all of the wonder of that relationship. On this Mother's Day, may we honor the mothers of this congregation in every shape, size, and form of every gender and sexual orientation. May we acknowledge the pain and hurt that can arise between mother and child. May we honor the imperfections and humanity of all mothers and of all children. May we feel ourselves connected not just to the human family, but the family of all creation in acknowledging our great capacity to love. May we remember that we are all profoundly lovable, that we have an inbuilt capacity to love, that lovability and love is not entirely exclusive to us as humans, but it is one of the things we do best. And may we ever and always be guided by that love. Blessed be, and amen.